And good evening. Welcome back to Monday's writing stream. It's always good to be here. We have space backgrounds. We have new music. It's all happening. Isn't it amazing? So welcome one and welcome all to the Monday evening writing stream. It is Monday evening, isn't it? Yes, it's all gone dark. It's crazy. I just haven't quite got my my hat settings right, because my hat is still vaguely transparent. So I'm still working on that, but we are we are improving generally overall. We are getting things back to the way they're supposed to be, which is all good. So yes, well, we should do the thing, because the thing is the thing, right? So who have we got here? Dr. Quest MD. Good to see you. Good to see you, my friend. Windy Butte GB is here, of course. Have a Boo Boo is here. Git Shiver is here as well. The Harkonnens are here, ready to invade Arrakis. Excellent. Commander Glenn is here. Insert HTML link to 9 Streams of Consciousness Glenn. Alan is here. Excellent. Good to see you, Alan. The Arrakis is here as well. Fighting off the invasion of the Harkonnens. Commander Tragic Blue is here. Commander Duskdawn is here. Pete SB is here. You look different. I know you look older. Yes. So various bits and pieces have happened to me. Just inevitable things, really. I had my birthday on Sunday, so yes, I am a year older than I was last time we spoke. At least numerically, anyway. We're all aging bit by bit in the fire of time, of course. But yes, I had my 52nd birthday. And it was good fun, actually. We went to a place called the Curious Brewery, and drank lots of beer, actually. Fairly inevitable, really, but that worked quite well. So that was fun, and yes, just generally had a good time. So yes, it was good, and we went rowing and did some other stuff and presents and things. I got myself a graphic equalizer. Who remembers graphic equalizers, right? That's my birthday present. My wife and sons were like, "What is this thing that you've asked us to buy?" And I said, "It's a box with a power button, and there's some sliders that go up and down." And my youngest son, who is very digital and not at all analog, was sort of berating me, saying, "Yes, but I can do that on my phone. Just look, I got one myself on my phone. It's just a piece of software." I said, "No, but this is hardware. This is analog. This is old school." So basically my stereo system, which I've slowly been building up over the years to do what I want it to do, has now got something like 8 or 9 different component things. So you've got an amp, a graphic equalizer, a turntable, a cassette deck, and all the other bits and pieces that of course you need to have if you're Generation X and you want to have a stereo. And my youngest son is very keen to point out that his phone can do all of these things and more. And I said, "Yes, but it's too small. There's no buttons. There's nothing to press. There's no lights going up and down." So just get it. It's bizarre. It has to be small and portable for some bizarre reason nowadays. It's now frowned upon for hi-fi. Yeah, well, I like graphic equalizers. I always have done. You need more levers and nods and more little LED things going up and down. It's perfect for me anyway. So there we go. Evening, JL1980. Well, good evening to you as well. So back to adverts followed by decoding error, reload, more adverts, and error again. Oh dear. So it's all about the dancing light. But so hopefully you're here now with us, JL1988. I don't have any control. I don't even know how Twitch ads work. I don't think I've got any control over that. So. Yeah, a bit weird. Yeah, I like my hardware to look like the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. Yeah, absolutely right. Get Shiver. That's exactly how it should be. Lots of lights. As I said to my youngest son. So when I press the off button, I can guarantee you that this device is actually off. It's not consuming any power now. It's off. It's obeying me. It doesn't have to reboot. Doesn't have to upgrade. It doesn't have to update. It doesn't do any weird spurious glitches or anything like that. It's just on or off. It's much simpler in the olden days, wasn't it? But anyway, and oddly enough, of course, I'm about to embark on an entire hour and a half, whatever we end up doing on this, on audiobooks, which of course I could do in the old analog way, but I wouldn't recommend it anymore. I don't know if some of you have actually seen my audio gear, but it's old school stuff from the 70s and 80s. So I have an old linear track turntable, which is very, very cool. A reel-to-reel tape player, proper old school reel-to-reel tape player, which is actually surprisingly good quality. Actually, I've got a normal cassette one as well, which is okay. Cassettes, aren't brilliant really, particularly nowadays. The vinyl's nice though. I do like listening to vinyl. I do have a CD player in there. I've now got a graphic equalizer in there. Then I've got a radio, and I've also got obviously a main amp and some speakers around to listen to the sound. It does actually. I also have a small Bluetooth device, so I can Bluetooth my phone into it if I haven't got something on reel-to-reel, cassette, vinyl, or CD. So my son can then hook his phone up to me and complain about anything else that I might be doing. But more switches, more lights. I like that in my cars and I like that in my stereos. But I will admit that for generating content today, it's very difficult to do things without a computer. Don't tell me you edit your audiobooks on the reel to. I'd love to try. It does have all the gear to do it, oddly enough. So I do have a microphone that will suit it. And it actually, on the side of the reel-to-reel, it has a splicing tool, so you can chop the tape, stick it back together, and then wind it back into the reel. I haven't actually tried that. One of these days, I really want to do a seriously old school editing session on the old equipment, but that's not what I'm going to do today. I think that would be quite fun. So a friend of mine thought his Cyrus amp didn't have enough switches, so he had a vertical takeoff switch. That's exactly what you need. More switches. It would take 5 years to get the book out that way. It would. But old school stuff has a charm because, and I think it's the analog nature of it. My son thinks I'm absolutely mad when I say, look, I'm just tweaking the head alignment of the cassette player. He's going, you what? I said, but it's not aligned correctly. You do that the other week. Yeah, but things might have changed. So it's got hot and cold in the interim, and it's a different time of the year. I've got to realign the heads on my cassette player. It's the same with my clocks, because I've got a bunch of what I would call proper clocks, i.e. clocks that don't have electronics in them, which you actually have to wind up, and they're powered by springs. And that's what I mean by a clock. Either springs or a weight. I've got a few that are run by weights. And those you have to reset every 3 months, because as the temperature changes, their component parts shrink and enlarge, and it changes the speed at which they run. So in the summer my clocks run too slow, and in the winter they run too fast. You have to adjust them. It's stuff that you've got to do, right? Whereas of course all this digital stuff nowadays, it's just just works. How boring is that? I had a cassette deck in my car up until very, very recently indeed. And demagnetizing things and degaussing things. all these skills are being lost to the ravages of time. And even my contemporaries, as you are probably aware by now, I am an anachronism of quite some time. Even my contemporaries I remember my dad had one of these. They don't know how to use it either. So those skills are they're being lost, alas. There aren't many people now who actually know how to use these things properly and actually manage them properly. It's quite funny. Yeah, they can. I remember them, but not quite sure how to use it anymore. So it's quite funny. Arrived to find Drew talking about chronometers on the audiobook stream. Seems about right for this. Yeah, well, we're still in the warming up stage. It's a bit like. Do you remember old-fashioned TVs with valves? Who remembers valves in TVs? Okay, so you had to switch them on, and you had to go away for 5 minutes while the thing warmed up. That's kind of how I am. Okay, I'm very analog. It's going to take me a while to warm up, get to operating temperature, and then we can get on with the main part of the stream. That's that's how it works. Just waiting for Drew to find a Nagamichi Dragon tape deck or whatever he had last of it. Yes, modern version of steampunk knobs and graphic equalizers. It is. It's there's nothing like a well damped knob, is there? Dear. Now there's a quote for you. I don't think we'll repeat that too often, though, will we? That's probably that's probably very bad. Alan says our first TV was pre-tuned to the only channel it could receive. Well, I remember when TVs. I mean, the first TVs that I recall were tuned like radios. You just had a dial where you'd spin it up and spin it back down. There's nothing like a... Yeah, it's a good quote. I think we should all live. We could all get behind that one, can't we? Ah, dear. So I'm probably going to regret that, but hey, never mind. So yeah, so the early TVs just had like a dial, didn't they? I just remember turning it and you tune it like a radio, well, like an old radio, because of course the radio's not tuned like that either. Tuning VCRs, and they were done the same way, because it was just a frequency, because it was UHF, wasn't it? V8, was it UHF? Yeah, I think it was UHF for TV, when it was all analog signals. And our TV, obviously, when I was, I don't know about how it was in different countries in the 70s, but in the UK, there were only 3 channels. It sounds crazy nowadays, but there literally were only 3 channels. There was BBC One, which was kind of your mainstream British broadcasting. There was BBC Two, which was for all the serious stuff. And then there was ITV, which was the independent television, ITV, which had adverts and all sorts of exciting things on it, and tried to make TV for money. And it was a big deal. I don't know when it was. Was it late 70s or early 80s when Channel 4 came in? Channel 4 was a big... We had 4 TV channels. You know, that was an increase of 33%. It was a big deal, whatever that was. Was that early 80s? And then, you know, satellite TV and everything else came in, and it was great. There's still nothing to watch, of course, as always. We had 6 broadcast channels in the US and UHF channels, maybe 3 or so. Okay, so Channel 4 was, yeah, it was early 80s. I remember staying off from school, or at least bunking off from school for the first part of the morning to watch Channel 4 start, because I thought, this is a historic event. There's a new TV channel. Gilly Buglar is here. Hello, Gilly Buglar. He thinks again. Here he is. Better late than never. Well, you're not late, because you know the first 20 minutes of this stream is just completely nonsense. A writer is never late, nor is he early, because Drew will still be waffling either way. Exactly right. We Alan had the chunky channel knob. Excellent. Well, then the push button stuff came out, wasn't it? It was a push button for 1, 2, 3, and then depending on the TV and how many TV stations they thought were coming, you'd have as many push buttons as you could get with. I remember one of the TVs we had 6 push buttons, and it was like labelled BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, and Channel 4, and then 5 and 6 were just labelled with stars, and you could like put a little piece of sticky tape in there and write on whatever the name of the channel that was coming next. And then you had then the expensive, the really posh people start getting remote controls. You know, you could actually change channels without getting off the sofa. And that was where the decadence basically started, wasn't it? After that, we were all doomed. Lucky Luigi, remember the same thing with Dutch TV, and also the godlike power of being the only child who understood how the knobs work. Big 39 Radio Rentals, who remembers them? Good grief. Yeah, when we got Glenn says when my dad got a TV remote, it was like we were living in the future. Wow, yes. So hey, things changed a lot, haven't they? And I must admit, I mean, I'm an old fogey now, obviously at the age of 52, and many of you will be sharing the same advancing numbers in their age. But it's amazing how much technology has changed over all those years, isn't it? It really is when you look back on it. It's bizarre. JR98 says, I'm way too young for this stream. I've got no idea what everyone's talking about. Kelly Baglaw says he had BBC One, BBC Two, ITV One, and ITV Two. So it was pre the naming of Channel 4. That's very cool. Tell the kids today, they won't believe it. It's very strange, but there we go. Reminiscing. Nostalgia ain't what it used to be, eh? Something like that. But yeah, and you compare it to now, where I don't know how many. I mean, Freeview, I've got no idea. It's hundreds of TV channels. I never watch TV really, but I still quite like DVDs and Blu-rays. I still quite like the idea of putting something physical in the machine, and the machine then going and doing something. I really haven't quite caught on to streaming, although it's sort of growing on me slowly. I'm being very curmudgeonly about adopting streaming because I don't like subscriptions, right? I like to buy things and then use them for a period of time, and then when I've decided to throw it out, that's when it's past its useful life. I don't like subscriptions. I don't like this whole give us some money every so often. And I'm totally hypocritical about it because, of course, effectively I pay a subscription for my power and my heating and my water, because I don't have my own power generation station, I don't have my own gas supply, and I don't have my own water purification plant. So I do pay a subscription. So why is TV entertainment any different? And I haven't got a good argument for that. It just is, okay. So I don't know. I just don't like subscriptions for content. I like my collection of cassettes and my vinyl because it's mine. I bought that and I keep it, and you can't take it away from me. So yeah, I mean, yeah, on books, yeah, I would probably trade DVDs for books, but there we go. It's weird. I browse all the channels and streaming channels, just look at all the movies and shows and go, yep, never find anything I want to bother watching. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? There's too much choice nowadays. So some people use torrents to get free downloads of anything that's streamed anywhere. Apparently it's a lot cheaper, allegedly. And luckily you're right as well. The great thing about having just a few channels is the next day you could talk to anyone at the bus stop. Have you seen the show? And they always would, yeah, because things happened at a point and everybody got it at the same time. So you talk about it at the office, or you talk about it with your friends, wouldn't you? Oh, did you see the last episode of? Yeah. Whereas nowadays, people can binge watch things in order, and you've got no idea. The only time you basically get that opportunity nowadays is when there's a premiere or something. Wintermute has Sky, Prime, Netflix, and he's now watching Twitch instead. So that's a good book. The other one that I miss from being a child is, when you would go out, you were watching a film or something, or you were ready to watch a film on ITV, on terrestrial television, before the days of VCRs and all that sort of thing. And as a kid, you'd be sitting there where your parents were out, and they're making a cup of coffee or getting some sticky buns or something in the kitchen. And as the show was starting, of course, there was no way to pause live TV. So you'd have to, as a child, you would leg it into the kitchen, basically shout, "It's on!" and then leg it back and dive onto the sofa, ready to catch the beginning of whatever it is, right? Kids these days don't have that fun, right? All those moments lost like tears in the rain, oh dear. All the fun we used to have in the 70s and 80s. It was good. Anyway, right, we should probably start moving very, 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 very slowly in the general direction of the topic. We're about 18 minutes into the stream. That's about good. So, moving swiftly into the serious part of the stream. Although I've got to catch up with the chat, so there we go. If you look on broadcast channels, yes, I still have an antenna. Oh, you do? Well done. You might actually stop and watch a show already in progress. But if I looked up on that show on stream, I would not. Yeah, that's a weird. That must be a psychological weirdness about him. Yeah, I'm the same. If I know something has been recorded and is now being streamed back, then it doesn't hold my interest very much, unless it's something I specifically want to see. Whereas if I catch a TV show that is kind of live, I can't watch it again because it's going through a live broadcast and it's not available anywhere else. I'm way more likely to watch it. Even if it's totally rubbish. What is that? I wanted to have got special permission to skip washing once a week because TNG was on. See, that's brilliant. See, I remember the uproar when cassettes were threatening the music industry. Yeah, I've still got that on some of my vinyl records. It's got that kind of cassette with a skull and crossbones, but in the shape of a cassette that basically says "Home taping is killing music." Clearly it didn't, but there we go. In the 1950s, Peter Cushing appeared in the full-length version of 1984, performed live in the studio and available now as a record. See, that's another thing that is nice, I suppose, about the modern age. There's a lot of archive materials being made public, which is a good thing. I think that is quite good. But there we go. Right, let's get on with the talk about, because tonight we're going to be talking about audiobooks. So we've been doing home baking is killing Greg's. We've been talking a lot about the production of books, right, all the way from the ideas, the world building, everything else, all the way up, and you can catch all those previous VODs. The VODs is the word, video on demand. Okay, VODs. Why everything has to be a 3-letter acronym nowadays, I don't know, but there we go. So we've gone through that process. Now we got to last week where we'd actually published a book, and then we started talking about marketing, right? Now we're talking about the next thing that is a big thing, is turning it into an audio book. So there we go. Right, I'm interested in the chat here. They did a medical study regarding memory and technology that's similar. We find we retain knowledge better when we know we can't find the information again. Okay, well, that's interesting. And Glenn says, so today a person on Facebook group for writers posted about this new book he put on Amazon. It was kind of sad. Obviously not a native English speaker, and he published an English book with obvious grammar issues, a super high price, and he's not willing to take advice from people, thinking we are criticism. Oops. Well, trouble is, if you can't take advice, you're not going to get anywhere, are you? JL98 says, today I feel like I'm going to find out from Drew whether I should create an audiobook. Well, it is a thing. Why are we even talking about audiobooks? Here's the first thing. Okay, so I've got a funny history with audiobooks. When I first wrote one of my first novels, the second one I wrote actually, third one I wrote, Elite Reclamation. I went to the first ever LaveCon convention, and they basically said to the writers, "Oh, go stand on stage and talk to us about audiobooks and writing and stuff." And I was like, I didn't know anything audiobooks. I didn't know anything about audiobooks. I'm a writer. I didn't record anything. And they said, well, you are going to turn your book into an audiobook, aren't you? And I went, yeah. The question was then rephrased, you are going to convert your book into an audiobook, aren't you? And I was like, yeah, I'll definitely do that. I was like, what? I hadn't even realised that audiobooks were such a big thing. I remembered audiobooks from my childhood. I had on cassette. I had a very good version of Treasure Island, obviously written by Robert Louis Stevenson, but I can't remember who did the audiobook version. And also Robinson Crusoe on cassette. And I remembered audiobooks as a child, and then I stopped listening to audiobooks, I don't know, the age of 13 or something, and completely forgotten them. I didn't even know they were still a thing. And then basically, the people 10 years ago, they've basically said, no, they are. You've got to do an audiobook. I said, okay, well, all right then. And back in the day, audiobooks still weren't selling all that well. But in the last 10 years, I've said this before on the stream, audiobooks have become a huge part of the revenue stream for a book. Really, really dramatic improvement. So I've noticed this in my sales, is that where I've got an audiobook version of a title, it sells as much copies of the book, if you like, in that format as ebooks. Just so effectively it doubles the amount of things you sell virtually straight away. So it's kind of, from that perspective, it's kind of like, well, that's a no-brainer, right? I should offer everything I do in audiobook form as well as text form, because clearly people want to consume it. And I think there's lots of reasons why people want to consume audiobooks. Is audiobooks you can listen to when you're on the move. Okay, that's a big deal, because you can't read a book when you're writing. When you're writing, definitely can't do that. You can't read an audiobook. Sorry, you can't read a normal book when you're driving. You can't do household chores or cooking or anything like that when you're reading. It's not compatible with reading a book, right? So I think audiobooks are way more portable and therefore much more accessible. An awful lot of people I hear listen, should I say, to audiobooks in the car when they're driving to places, and it's clearly important to have your hands on the steering wheel and paying attention to the road. A lot of people do a lot of travelling where a book is maybe a bit too inconvenient, and some people just don't like reading but do like stories. So and I think it's also a bit of a demographic thing as well. What I've noticed is my audiobook stuff is being consumed by a younger audience on average than the text stuff on average. Okay, there's exceptions all the way through that, but on average Audible stuff is appealing to a younger audience than text. Seems to be one of those things. Okay, now whether that bears out in your experience, I don't know, but that's certainly something I've noticed from just watching what people do with the stuff I produce. So so there we are. Cool. Thank you for the 2-tier subs and gifts there, Sunny Smith. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That's very nice of you. Good to go to sleep too. I've never tried that actually, because it's the headphones. I'd bang something. And I have a lot of people who say it's nice to listen to an audiobook because it's something just pleasant about listening to a story, and arguably the audio telling of a story is the oldest way of telling a story. Telling stories by voice is actually way older than printed text, so you could argue it's the original form of storytelling. So maybe I have something like that as well. Stumpy says, I've basically stopped reading books on Kindle, audiobooks only. But Glenn says, I find my attention wanders when I'm listening to an audiobook or even a YouTube video when I'm also doing other things and I feel I have to rewind. So it depends on how you want to consume things, but having the option, I think, is very welcome. So that's really, really good. So Command Cedo says, I'm an absolute addict. I have difficulty physically reading due to net problems, so they're literally lifesavers. So there you go. So some people, it's accessibility is a big deal. Working from home has increased my listening to audiobooks. Can you do a video book? Just sitting by the fire. I suppose I could. I haven't tried that. That's an interesting idea. So creating audiobooks may be good for your book. Okay, it's just another audience that may be able to appreciate what you do rather than limiting it to just text. Now, so what do you need to do to create an audiobook? Okay, well, the first thing you need to have done is everything else that we've already talked about. Okay, so before you create an audiobook, you have to have a book. All right. It has to be finished. It has to be in a state of publishability. Okay, so everything else that we've talked about is therefore a given before we start on the audiobook. There's no point having a book that isn't edited and sorted out and fixed and checked and styled and blah 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 blah. Okay, it doesn't necessarily need to be in paperback format, but it does need to be finished. All right, it does need to be done. It needs to be a book. Okay. So you can just talk, but otherwise, then you end up with a stream like this where you just have some kind of mad middle-aged geezer just waffling on about whatever topic takes his fancy on a particularly Monday evening. You need to be finished. Okay, you need to be finished. Now, in order to, the nice thing about writing in general, okay, and everything we talked about so far is all you really need is probably an ancient laptop. Okay, as long as it can run a copy of Word or some word processing program, that'll do. All right, you could probably even do it in Notepad, just about, or WordPad, or something very, very basic. To write a book, you don't need much tech. All right, you don't need much tech. Now, when it comes to an audiobook, you're going to need a bit more. All right, now, unlike producing videos and streaming and all that sort of stuff, the sort of stuff I'm literally doing right now, okay, you don't need a super powerful PC, but you do need a little bit more than you do just for writing. The key thing is that you're going to have to record yourself. Okay, you're going to need a microphone. Okay, now, a microphone is a magic device that slurps all your sound and turns it into electronic things. Right, that's how microphones work. Now there are basically two types. Okay, I've a small demo. Okay, I've got one of the one I'm using at the moment is actually in front of me. I can gently pick it up. This might make a slight clunk on the sound, so apologies if it does. There's this one. Okay, here we go. I hope this cable's long enough. Okay, here's my current mic. Okay, this is the one I'm using right now to talk to you. So we're going to start with, you're going to do the voice reading. We will talk about other stuff as well. Okay, so this is a mic, right? This is a mic. Now you may notice, if you can see, this mic is suspended in a little cage. Okay, little kind of elastic bands here, which suspend it so that it's not actually kind of solidly physically connected to anything else. That particular type of mic is called a condenser mic. Okay, it's called a condenser mic. Yeah, sort of mic prison. It's all tied up in it. The idea is for that sort of little cage to absorb any vibrations and try and isolate the mic from anything that might otherwise pick up any noise. Now, that's a condenser mic. There's another type of mic, which is this is an example of one. This is a very famous one. This one's so famous actually that a song has been written about it. This is the world famous SM58. Okay, this is called a dynamic microphone. Okay, the sort of microphone that if somebody said, "What does a microphone look like?" Is this. Okay, now these are really good for some things. Okay, dynamic microphones like this are you can drop this, you can throw it at people. They're very tough. Okay, they're really good for live performances because they can take a lot of punishment. They are particularly good for loud noises. So if you've got somebody on the stage live and they're singing away into their mic, that's why you see this sort of mic, because they're really good for loud noises. They're not particularly good for soft noises. These mics aren't powered. Okay, they're kind of passive. Mic drop. Here we go. Yeah, so they're tough. They're really good for loud noises, but they're not particularly good for subtle stuff. Okay, so this is not a vocal mic for an audiobook. Okay, this is not a vocal mic for an audiobook. If you're doing a live performance and you need lots of PA and all sorts of stuff like that, and you really want to belt it out, then yes, this is brilliant. But an SM58 or a dynamic mic like this is not ideal for an audiobook. These mics here, as condenser mic, is way more sensitive. Now you can also see it's got a little light on it, and the reason it's got a little mic on it is it's a powered mic. Okay, it's a powered mic, and it has a system. You may come across this. It's called Phantom Power. I've got no idea why it's called Phantom Power. It's got a little bit of power going to it, allows it to do what it does. These mics are way more sensitive. Okay, these are way more sensitive, and they can pick up little whispers really easily. So if you can just about hear what I'm saying, this mic's really good at that. Gives you a lot of dynamic range. Okay, so you can yell at it as long as you're not too close to it, but you can also whisper and put in very subtle sound effects, which is again good for voice recording in this kind of environment. So that's good. These mics are quite fragile. Okay, if you drop one of these, it will bust. So don't basically. They're much more expensive, and they do need to be powered to work. And that can be either by USB nowadays, or some of the older ones will have what we call XLR cables, which then plug into a special adapter on a digital audio workstation, or sometimes into your PC, depending on what you've got. So all those sorts of things are important. So I would definitely recommend a condenser mic as a first start. Okay, you're going to get much better audio quality for what you want. Now the other thing that you're going to need is the right environment to do it in. Yeah, you're quite right. Commander C Dweller. Dynamics do use XLR as well. You can see the bottom of this actually. That is an XLR connection. Okay, those three pins, and I assume the other ones are an earth. I'm not quite sure what the wiring is, but that's an XLR connection. Don't ask me what XLR stands for, because I don't know. it just plugs in and you plug it in somewhere else. Okay. But a condenser mic is probably what you want for audiobook stuff if you're going to do it yourself. Okay, so this is assuming you want to do this kind of stuff yourself. The next stage is the room in which you do it. Okay, now this is tricky as well. Now I've had problems with this in the past because I only had one setup. I've now switched to do two setups. Now let me just show you what I mean. Here, this is going to be a bit kind of inception-y here, because here is a picture of my where I'm currently sitting looking at you, if that makes sense. So this looks a bit weird. Ignore the plate which had my sandwich on it earlier on. But this is actually where I'm sitting now. Okay, this is my streaming environment. You can see I've got my HOTAS and my throttle here, my mouse and the volume control, a couple of speakers. These pair of lights which are currently working, doing their thing for the streaming. Okay, and you can see where the mic is positioned just there, and here's the camera up here. Okay, fairly simple. Now this is jolly convenient for streaming because the walls allow me to bounce light around and bounce it off the green screen behind me and get fairly static levels of illumination, which is important for streaming. When I get it right, you can see the band in my hat isn't quite right at the moment, but it's good for gaming because I've got the two monitors, etc. But it isn't very good for audio quality. Okay, not for audiobook recording. So when I was doing audiobook recording, I didn't have it set up like this, and I had to move things about, which was a faff, which is why my streaming wasn't always ideal, because I was having to move things about and alter settings. Okay, Commander C dual, yes, you're quite right. So pickup patterns, cardioid and omnidirectional. That's good. There's two other. So there's a few things to bear in mind. So condenser versus dynamic. Definitely recommend condenser mics. Okay. There is also cardioid and omnidirectional. Now omnidirectional is pretty easy to understand because like omnidirectional, all directions simultaneously. Okay. That's the sort of mic you would lower into an orchestra pit or into a band to pick up everything if that's where you were trying to do it. You quite often see them on live studios as well, for stage productions, things like that. You don't want an omnidirectional mic, okay? The only reason you'd want an omnidirectional mic is to pick up the ambience of a room, which actually is the last thing you want to do with an audiobook, right? Okay, and multidirectional is like a conference call mic, that sort of thing, yeah. So you don't want an omnidirectional. What you want is a cardioid mic, right? I don't know why it's called cardioid, not unidirectional, but that's just one of those things. Okay, so basically a cardioid microphone is a unidirectional mic. It only works in one direction. If you again look at this, let me just go back here again, here to this mic has a light on it, which is basically telling you speak into this end. All right, it doesn't have a light on the back. It is a cardioid microphone, and it only accepts I mean, it will record, but it won't record nearly as well facing in the wrong direction. So it's a directional microphone, not an omnidirectional microphone. Do you need a pop filter too? Well, I'm not using one at the moment, and I don't generally use one for streaming. You can use one, but normally you don't want to be too close to the mic anyway. But it depends also a little bit on how you speak. Now, having said that, going back to here, this is my streaming setup. As you can see, there isn't a pop mic. I've just got the thing. The mic is relatively well shielded on its own, but and you can move away from the mic, so there is an optimum distance. Okay, I'm about, probably leaning forward there, I'm probably about a foot away, 12 inches, 30 centimeters away from the mic. And if I sit back here, okay, I can go quite a long way back before the mic starts to have any issues picking me up. And if I get really close to the mic, it sounds a little bit intimate, doesn't it? So, you know, it's, you know, you can play around with those things in terms of the recording as well. So that's the thing. On my now the problem with this for audiobook recording is actually the walls. Okay, so the walls here work really well for streaming because they allow me to bounce a lot of light around, make it nice and even, which is important for the green screen, things like that. Very bad news for audio recording, as you can probably hear actually if you're listening to this, because there will be quite a lot of reverb, because what's happening of course is the sound is bouncing off the two walls and reaching the microphone very slightly later than the direct sound that I'm giving it, which means you get this sort of subtle reverb. So basically the room dynamics are being picked up by the mic. You don't, in an ideal world, you don't want that, okay, because it's going to make your recording sound a little bit kind of blurred. You know, you can add reverb in later if you wish to as a special effect, but you don't really want any reverb on your initial recording if you can avoid it, because you can then process things. The cleanest possible original recording is what you're after. So compare and contrast to what I've got here. This is my audiobook setup as it actually happens at the moment. And you may think this doesn't look ideal, and it isn't ideal because I don't have the space to do everything that I want to do in my study. But this is way, way better from an audio recording perspective than the streaming setup. You can see there's a pop shield. Behind there is an older version of the mic that I'm currently using, which, as you can see, does have an XLR cable. It's the world's smallest recording studio as well. Yes, it is. Now, what I've got here is a microphone set behind the pop shield with an anti-resonance sort of screen behind it. Okay, portable damping screens. Okay, so these are really good. I was really impressed by this. The other thing is I've got it offset against the side of the machine, offset against the side of the room, and actually backed up by my bookcases. And you can see a stack load of kind of books and things on there. You know, now you may think this looks untidy, and it isn't tidy, but from an audio quality perspective, having lots of random shapes behind the microphone is actually really, really good, because what happens is it breaks up any reflecting sound waves and bounces them in all sorts of weird directions, so they don't really coalesce with the microphone, which means when I record on this mic, there's barely any room resonance at all. I don't pick up you don't pick up any echoes, which is what you're trying to avoid. So it's far better than the corner of the room that I am in at the moment in terms of that kind of audio quality. So if you've got a cluttered environment, and many of us do have cluttered environments, they're really good actually for audiobooks. If you basically need an excuse not to tidy up, just say, I'm recording audiobook, this is all part of this sonic background, because it is actually true. Now the other little things I've got here, I've got the pop shield, I've got the dampening environment for the mic, which is important. Down here I've got a very old iPad. Okay, this is a classic iPad from probably 10 years ago. It can't do anything anymore, but what it can do, the only thing it can do, the only thing I've managed to get it to do, is it can accept emails with EPUB formatted ebooks on it. So what I do is basically, when I want to record something, I email it to myself. Well, actually, I've got a single email address set up for this iPad, I email the EPUB book to it, and I open it up on this iPad, and I use the iPad as effectively a teleprompter. Okay. Yes, and what I do, Command C to is when I'm recording audio, I have the green screen down behind me. When I'm facing, because this is basically diagonally the opposite direction in my study, I have the green screen down. The green screen acts as a double duty, so it's also a sound dampener as well as a green screen, which does work quite well. So you can eliminate an awful lot of room resonance if you have a little think about it. So a cluttered environment is really good for recording audiobooks in. The only caveat for that is you don't want lots of loose objects that can move around and click and make noises. Okay. Long answered, yeah. So make use of things. Having things on the wall, so what you don't want in an audiobook environment is lots of flat areas. Okay, you want lots and lots of spiky, pointy things. That's why if you go into a normal studio, you see the walls are coated with all this sort of stuff to break up the contours of the room. Okay, and you want it obviously as quiet as possible. Now I can't get rid of all the noise. So I have to record when pretty much everybody's out the house. I can't record when the heating's on. I can't record when the space birds are doing their thing. I can't record when the window's open and somebody's mowing the lawn. I can't record when the Spitfires are going over. There's lots of occupational hazards, okay, that I have to avoid. But in between all that, I can get some recording done, and that's basically what you need to do. So a cluttered environment works really well. If you can't do a full-blown studio, clutter is good. Okay, clutter is good. So that's an important thing. I always use a pop shield for the audio recording. I don't notice much difference with it. It's just one of those things I've always done. Now a pop shield basically, when you say certain sounds, so anything beginning with P basically is a bad one. So pop, okay, you're going to get a pulse of air every time you say a word with P in it, and B is quite bad as well. Those sort of words. P is particularly bad. And basically there's a pulse of air, and when that pulse hits the microphone, it actually pushes the microphone and generates a signal, which is not the sound so much, it's just the pulse of air that associates with it. And you'll get a dunk on your microphone if you're too close. Now a pop shield basically has a diaphragm in it, which basically takes away the air pressure but allows the sound of the P, as it were, to go through to the mic. So there we go. So the audio dampening properties of a Tribble are legendary. But yes, I absolutely recommend that you get yourself a Tribble. Do I stand or sit while recording? Now there's the thing. Okay, now I tend to now sit. Okay, I used to think actually I ought to be standing, but the thing is, recording an audiobook takes quite a long time. Okay, now I tend to do about an hour in one go, and standing talking to a mic for an hour is actually quite hard work. So I've tested sitting down recording and standing up recording, and I haven't really noticed a difference in my intonation. So I now sit down to record my audiobook, which is way more comfortable than standing up. Now some people will say you've got to be careful about that because you do compress your diaphragm a bit when you're sitting compared to when you're standing. But I think that's really only if you're planning on singing your audiobook. that's going to give you too much of a problem. So I sit down, but you ought to, yeah, I think your posture should be good. So sit up straight when you're recording your audiobook, and don't let yourself slouch. That's good. That's good advice at any stage of life, to be honest, or anything that you're doing. But I don't think you need to be standing up. I don't anyway anymore. So so that's the thing. Yes, Mum. So there we go. So that's a little bit about the equipment. Okay, we will talk about getting somebody else to do this, but this is all about kind of being self-sufficient as much as possible. So in summary, blank walls bad. Okay, so clutter good. Cardioid microphone, i.e. single directional mic, and condenser mic. You also need a reasonable PC to record all this. What do you need software wise? Okay, well, now you can start with something pretty basic. Okay, so the basic sound recorder. Has Windows still got a sound recorder? I don't know. Maybe it has or not. I don't know whether that does or not. But the basic one that comes with Windows, if there is one, is probably not gonna cut it. Okay, you need a basic sound editor. And there are quite a lot of free ones out there. I don't know if I've got Audacity installed on this PC. I don't. But Audacity is a well-known multi-track editor, which is free, which will plug into your mic and allow you to start recording. Does perfectly good results. Okay, so there's free software out there, and if you can run Audacity, you've probably got all the technical stuff that you need in order to generate an audiobook. Okay, what you want to be able to do is ensure that you can save the files at a good level of quality. Now, I tend to work with uncompressed audio to start with. So I generally record in Wave, which is sort of Windows native audio format, at a decent sort of bit rate. Now, you're usually going to be okay sticking with the defaults on this, but it is worth a note. Don't record to start with in MP3. Okay, MP3 is a very ubiquitous file format, and it allows you to share your music anywhere. Now, you will certainly use MP3 because actually, for example, Audible requires you, I think last time I used it anyway, requires you to upload it in MP3 format. So you're going to have to do that at some point. But you don't want to be editing in MP3 because you've already lost some of whatever quality you had to start with. So you want to start with a lossless recording mechanism, and I generally just stick to WAV files because it's Windows and it works with everything. But there are other tools. That's definitely a thing. So basically, don't use any format that uses compression to start with. Always use something that's marked as lossless, i.e. it's as genuine a recording as you can get from your audio equipment. You will need to downscale it later, but only do that after you've finished everything. Okay, finished all the editing and everything else that you need to do. So that's a word on the software. Now, in terms of your PC, I would probably guess that any PC stroke laptop from the last 5-10 years, probably 5 years for a laptop and 10 years for a PC, is up to the job of audio editing. You don't need, by gaming standards, any horsepower at all to have an audio editor. It's not like video editing, it's not like playing a game. Pretty much any PC that can run Windows 10 will be able to manage it. If you're using a Mac, I don't know much about them, so your mileage may vary. But again, it's not a high horsepower requirement in terms of audio editing. It's pretty fast. Okay, so doesn't take up much disk space, doesn't take up much processing power or memory. So you should be fine. If you've already got a PC that you can play a game on, audio editing should be a cinch. Okay. Any advantage or difference between WAV, lossless and FLAC? I haven't really delved into it, to be honest, Wintermute. I've only stuck with WAV out of familiarity because every product on the PC will read a WAV file. That's my only ever reason, and I've never had any issues. So some of it's down to familiarity. I haven't really. There's no point me doing a comparison between them if I'm happy with the quality that's coming out of one. So I mean, because I don't like changing the way I work, if that makes sense. So that's basically how it works for me. So that's my view. You will need to go down to MP3, however, for some publishing systems. As I've already mentioned, Audible, I think, requires MP3. at a certain bit rate, and it's advisable to. Let's just have a look actually what Audible does recommend. Does it actually say? Okay, so here we go. This is ACX audio submission requirements for Audible. Okay, each file must be 192 kilobits or higher, 44.1 kilohertz MP3. Okay, so that's the Audible submission guidelines. Now, I would recommend. I mean, 192 kilobits is nowhere near high enough for good quality audio, in my humble opinion. Okay, when you get constant bitrate means that that number there basically never changes. I certainly wouldn't recommend you do variable bitrate stuff. It's a bit weird. 256 kilobytes is the absolute minimum I would suggest. That's generally what I aim for audio, unless you're doing a lot of music in your audiobook and special effects. You're probably beginning okay with 256 kilobits. Don't mess around with this one at all. That is basically kind of a standard CD quality frequency range. As Commander C. Dweller has just mentioned, 44.1 kilohertz is the width of sound from really, really low frequency stuff to really, really high frequency stuff that the human ear can hear or perceive. Now, that's basically what the CD spec is, and that's what Amazon have decided. Now, strictly speaking, some humans can exceed that. They can hear lower sounds or higher frequency sounds, but CD quality is fine, right? No point exceeding CD quality. So that's basically what Audible requires. Now, depending on where you're going, you might have other requirements, but the vast majority of audiobooks come through Audible, so it's worth knowing what they have. So they are requiring you to effectively downgrade to MP3 format at some point in the future. So you will need to master your recordings into MP3 format at some point in time for Audible in this case. Okay, so I would go a bit higher than 192. I would say 256 would be a minimum. You can go a little bit higher than that with MP3, but it kind of almost isn't worth it because MP3 compression cuts in and does funny stuff to your sound as well. Audiobooks for dogs are a completely different topic. Yeah. So that's basically what that's all about. Okay. Now a word on technique. Okay. Now the first thing you're going to need to record your audiobook is to have a kind of voice, okay, that is okay for an audiobook. Now what I've done in here, this is what I use. I need to upgrade this actually because it's an old version, but I know where everything is. I know how it works. So familiarity with your audio tool is something that is a big deal, okay? Because it basically controls how fast you can work through stuff. So what I've got here is here's one I prepared earlier. Okay, so unlike most of my streams, I spent a couple of hours this afternoon actually preparing some stuff in advance. Okay, JR19, he says it has a. He has a face for radio and a voice for print. Does this application have a graphic equalizer? Would you be surprised to know that it does? And you can have all sorts of fun playing around with that. Technically, that's not a graphic equalizer. That's a mixer, but it's close enough, right? There is a graphic equalizer in here somewhere I can play around with. But yes, you can have a play around. Okay, so. And here comes Drew's posh voice. Now, you have to have a voice that works for audio. Now, what do I mean by that? You have to be able to read something with expression. Okay? So, take a classic like, I don't know, not Tolkien, Dickens, from The Christmas Carol. The Marleys were dead to begin with. Dead as a doornail, Or Marley was dead to begin with. You need to be able to put expression into your voice and live through the text and make sure that you can put across the emotion of what you're talking about. You need to act, okay? You do need to act. So when you're reading from a piece of text, you have to put yourself in the character. You have to do the actions, okay? So when somebody is frustrated, you have to do it. All right, you have to put yourself in there. And when somebody's sad, you just have to be there. You have to put a bit of emotion into it. Okay. Now, if you're not comfortable with that, creating your own audiobook may not be for you. All right, you do have to ham it up. You really do. Okay, you have to ham it up. Salome's live. No, she's not. Brian Blessed doesn't need a microphone from any location. No, he doesn't. But you know what I mean. Okay, you have to put some emotion in. Now, I've got two examples of that. Okay. A returning chatter from Dr. Nagel. Hello, good to see you. Dr. Quest MD says, I have a very monotone sound, express zero emotion, and have the ability to stun the strongest mind into a slumber. But Alan's quite right. Don't overdo it, okay? Otherwise, it becomes a caricature. You've got to put in the right amount, and that can only come with practice, okay? So here's a bit of technique, okay? Now, the first thing is you've got to develop your reading. I don't know. What's the word? Behaviour, I suppose is the right word. Okay, to make sure you're not bringing in any extraneous noise. So what do I mean by this? So here's an example of me, and I'm deliberately hamming these up, okay, just for the microphone. I'm just going to mute myself and so you can listen to me again on this. But okay, there's too much noise. Okay, so accidentally clipping you can probably hear that on the mic now. Okay, accidentally clipping my elbows on the table, or dropping the mouse, or moving something on the keyboard, or even turning the page. Did you hear that? Okay, you can't do any of that. Okay, you can't do any of that, because otherwise you end up with something that sounds like this. Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking forth to the citadel of Zajikith. We found the way south blocked, Marakith reported after we reached the beleaguered citadel. We could not hope to prevail that night, so we rode to the east through the plains of Thrawn and approached from that way. It seems a doom guard has scouted us. We would have been here sooner, Kumar grunted, but it's a long and weary road. Okay, so that's an example of no, stop that from playing. That's an example of recording whilst not concentrating on not making any noise. Okay. Now, that recording, I mean, that one was overemphasized for the sake of fun and games and demonstration. Okay, so that recording probably isn't salvageable. Okay, because it's got too much noise in it. The amount of editing I'd have to do to get the noise out of that recording is extreme. Okay, deliberately so, right? So you're going to get some extraneous noise inevitably. Okay, you just can't avoid it, because sometimes the house will just creak, right? Or the wind will, or something will go wrong, and you may have been an hour into recording. You're going to get something, okay, and you're going to have to go through and deal with that something in your audio recording. But the more noise you can avoid, so basically you have to watch your breathing. You have to make sure your arms don't touch anything. Never ever touch the mic. Okay, if you are reading from an actual book, which I don't recommend. Okay, when you get to the end of a page, you actually have to stop. Okay, then make a very deliberate turn of the page, wait, and then start reading again. So it's very easy for you to trim out the page turn noise. Okay, your stomach will gurgle. Okay. Things like that. And the good thing about the condenser mics is they pick up everything. The bad thing about the condenser mics is they pick up everything. Okay, so bear in mind that you need to have not just run up the stairs, because you'll be short of breath and that will come across in the recording. Don't do it just after you've had lunch, because noises. Don't do it just before lunch, because noises. Don't do it if you've got a cold. Don't do it if you've got a sniffle. Anything like that will ruin your recording. Okay, so you need to bear all those sort of things in mind. Okay, so that's the first example. So here's another one. Okay, this is one that I actually have a problem with. It's called tongue clicks. Okay, and you'll find out why in a moment. Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west to the citadel of Zajikith. We found the way blocked, Marakith reported. The army had reached the beleaguered citadel. We could not hope to prevail against their might, so we rode east through the plains of Thrawn and approached from that way. It seemed the Doomguard discounted us. We would have been here sooner, our Kumar grunted, but it's a long and weary road. Okay, so that's an example of, it wasn't quite so bad that time, but still pretty bad, okay? Basically, when your mouth has to be a certain, banana eating eyes, yeah. Your mouth has to be a certain lubrication, shall we say, to work. Okay, you have to have some dampness in your mouth, otherwise you will find that you can't speak properly. And then what happens is, subconsciously you will lick your lips, okay? You will do that automatically to keep the moisture around your mouth, okay? And the problem is that makes a noise, okay, as you heard. And as you open your mouth, if you stopped and then open your mouth, there will be a click, okay? You can't avoid it. So you can minimize it by being aware of it. And you may just have to take a moment going, right, I'm going to stop recording at this point. Moisten my mouth a bit and then start again, okay? The trick here is to have a glass of water with you, okay? And you can take sips from it occasionally. That water should be room temperature water, so don't have chilled water, because chilled water mucks up your vocal cords, right? So here's another top tip. Have room temperature water that you can just sip every few minutes to keep the lubrication going. You'll find that will work quite well. You pronounced Zajikith wrong. Yeah, I know. That's my pronunciation of Zajikith, and I'm sticking with it. So, again, this is technique. Because every click means a piece of editing work that you have to do. You don't want clicks, especially if you've recorded something for... Now, for example, an average audiobook is about 20 hours long, okay? That's 20 hours of pure edited sound, which probably means there's something like 30 hours of unedited sound. That's a lot of editing that you have to go through, okay, in order to make an audiobook, because you've got to get rid of every click, every pop, every mistake, every whatever's gone wrong with the recording and sort it out, okay? So it's just more editing. That's the bad thing about audiobooks. Lots and lots and lots and lots of editing, okay? How long of a segment do you record before cutting? Okay, so what I basically do is I do a scene. So if I take Lords of Midnight here, chapter 16. So actually, let me put on the full camera again. Here we go. So this is what I'm reading from. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm reading from chapter 17, wasn't I? Let's do that. Chapter 17. Where's chapter 17? Come on. God, chapter 16 is long, isn't it? There we go. Okay, so chapter 17, right? There we go. Is my books are generally broken up into sections. So you can see here is there's a page followed by the next page. Sorry, there, and then there's a scene break here. Okay, that's where I would stop recording. Okay, that's where I would stop recording and take a break. Okay, that's probably 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, I would recommend you don't record more than 3 or 4 minutes in one go, because otherwise, A, you start getting tired, and B, it just becomes quite a long thing to manage. So I generally record a scene chunk and then stop, have a little sip, stop, break, then record another one. Okay, so that's generally what I do. Your mileage may vary depending on how easy you find it, but that's basically the technique I've done. So it's up to you. That's what works for me. You might want to do shorter chunks. It just feels more logical to me, because if I know a chapter is broken up into 8-9 different scenes, then I've got 8-9 different little files all in order, and I know which one's which. Yeah, that it just makes it easier. So that's the thing. Now, another thing about recording. Okay, so let's go back here. Let's mute that one. Next one. Now, levels. Okay. Now, in the olden days, when we used to record things onto reel-to-reel cassettes and things like that, reel-to-reel tape and cassettes. Audio levels, you tended to boost them as high as you could get because you didn't have any way of dealing with the background noise. Okay, so if there was hiss, or which you got in analog recordings, you wanted to minimize that as much as possible. So you tended to push the audio levels as high as you could. In fact, even over the range of peak recording, to get the maximum amount of signal, because there'll always be a bit of degradation. But analog systems allowed you to go over the peak of the audio saturation without actually causing any distortion. Digital systems don't work like that. Okay, so it's really, really, really important that you don't go too high with your gain levels on your microphone. Now, you can probably see it on this recording. If I double click on that one, you can see here. Notice the pattern. This bit of audio here is kind of okay. Okay, the levels are about 50% of the maximum. So it starts at 0. Well, effectively it starts at minus. What does it start at? Minus 100 dB and goes up to 0. I know it's very, very decibel. I never really understand decibels. I just know what you're not supposed to do. So here is about 50% of the maximum volume here, and this is left channel and right channel. So this is about 50% of the maximum recording for the left channel. This is about 50% recording of the right channel. So that's kind of okay. What you can see here though is some flat topped sections. Okay, quite a lot of them. Okay, now what's happened there is that the signal strength is too much. There's basically too much gain for the recording, so it's had to limit it, and it cuts it off very abruptly. And basically, if you see a flat topped thing in your recording like that, your recording is junk, I'm afraid. You're going to have to go and do that piece entirely again because your levels are wrong, and you need to basically bring it down. And it's called clipping. That's exactly right. So you don't want any clipping because you can hear it as a sort of weird crunch, I suppose is the best way to describe it on the audio recording. So we'll listen to this one. You'll get what I mean by listening to it. Here we go.
Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west to the citadel of Zajakith. We found the way blocked, Marakith reported after the army had reached the beleaguered citadel. We could not hope to prevail against their might, so we rode to the east through the plains of Thrawn, and approached from that way. It seems the Doomguard discounted us. We would have been here sooner, Kumar grunted, but it's a long and weary road.
Okay, so that one is, it's subtle, and the louder you are, the more you go over the clip, the worse it is. But there's a kind of fuzzy buzz to the areas where the clipping is happening. And so from a visual inspection of the audio source, if you've got these flat topped areas where they've been clipped off, your audio recording is not good enough. Okay, you've got to reduce the level and do it again. Ideally, you want your maximum. In fact, this next one is quite a good example of what good looks like. Okay, you can have it subtle like this. Okay, where the maximum volume that you achieve, even when you're shouting about something, is about 70 to 80% of the volume. Okay, that's healthy for a digital recording. The thing to remember here is you can always enhance it a bit, but you can never bring it down once it's clipped. Okay, you can always go up, you can always make it louder, but you can't come down from when it's clipped. Okay. Cedar, you haven't mentioned mic distance, particularly the proximity effect. Yeah, so I don't know much about that one actually. I tend to stay a certain distance away. I would recommend you are always at least a foot, 30 centimeters away from microphone. So actually, Cedar, tell us more about the proximity effect, because that's a new one on me. I probably have heard about it, but I tend to stay away from the mic. Don't be too close to the mic. I've always been told not to be too close. Well, what's the reason? What's the reason? So tell us that as I prep up the next audio sample. That'd be good to have in the chat. Is that the old Sea Dog version? Yeah. So I have to emphasise things for effect. Apologies for that. It's all good fun though. It's all good fun. So tell us all about CDL is frantically typing now, hopefully, into the chat. Okay, so there we go. So proximity effect is a disproportionate increase in low. Yes, I did know that. Low frequency levels when too close to mic. Okay, so when you're close up, everything sounds a bit more bassy than it otherwise would, and you lose the top end in favour of the bass. Okay, because it's all about the bass, right? So don't be too close to the mic. You need to get the right distance. Obviously, the further you get away from the mic, the more tinny the recording becomes. And that's not right either. So it depends on the effect you're going for. Be a comfortable distance from the mic, but not close range and not too far away. And get the recording level such that you don't experience the clipping. Okay, so all of those things are little things that you need to bear in mind when you're doing recording. Optimum distance when studio for vocals is often about 8 inches when doing spoken word, but it also depends a little bit on the setup you've got. You can't get. Yeah, you've got to be a bit careful. Now, I like to act a bit when I'm doing my audiobooks. Okay, so I will gesture. Okay, and I'll get really cross for things, and you need the space to be able to do that. So it's a compromise, as things always are, right? But no, don't jump about because that will make a noise. So you have to restrain your acting to a point because you don't want any noise to be picked up by the mic. So all of those things are important considerations as well for recording. So all of these things are a compromise, and you need to do a whole bunch of test recordings to get the best out of your environment. Okay, it's all part of the game. Right, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, so this one actually looks like a reasonable recording. Okay, it is in fact a reasonable recording, but it doesn't have any emotion in it. Okay, so here's a recording which isn't very good, but is technically okay. Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west to the citadel of Zanchkith. We found our way to the south blocked, Marakith reported after the army had reached the beleaguered citadel. We could not hope to prevent against their might, so we rode to the east through the plains of Thrawn and approached from that way. It seems the Doomguard discounted us. We would have been here sooner, Kumar grunted, but it's a long and weary road. Okay, so that's the same piece of text, right? But it's really, really, really boring. Okay, you can't afford to make your story boring when it's an exciting thing. Okay, so there's an exciting thing happening here, but it didn't come across like that. So you've got to, as Alan's already said, you can't overdo it, but you must do enough. Okay, you can't just read it. Okay, you've got to be there in the story and provide some emotion to it. Now, you wrote the thing, okay, so you should be able to inject the right emotion into it. Now, the other trick there, of course, you've got two characters. Now, I'm not an expert voice actor by any stretch of the imagination. There are people who can do that far better than me, but it's worth having something of a different inflection between the characters. So, for example, Marakith, in this example, I've done as quite a fast-spoken, sort of abrupt character. Right, well, we're going to get this done, okay? Yeah, things need to be done now. Okay, that's Marakith's kind of temperament. Okay, now Kumar is an old war dog. Okay, so he's much more gruff and kind of like, I've seen it all before. What we're going to do is we're going to wait and see what the enemy does. Okay, so you can put different cadences into your characters. Just remember which one is which, right? Okay, so you need to come up with a little bit of how am I going to portray this character to make them slightly distinct from the other ones. So, for example, I've got Luxor and Morkin in this story, so father and son. So Luxor is going to be, he's quite gruff, he's quite forceful and knows his mind and doesn't like taking anybody, disagreeing with him at all. That's not how Luxor likes things. Whereas Morkin's much more young. He's really enthusiastic about it. Oh, that's so exciting. What's going to be going on over there? So different voices, different cadences, different speeds, all sorts of things. Unless you're good at accents, I wouldn't recommend accents because they can sound really, really enough. I mean, if you can do a good accent, then do one. But I can't. I read pirate book. I did. Gianna, that's quite fun. I did. I read to my kids, and I put it on CD for them. because I was travelling a lot when I was years ago when they were young. And they did the entire Reverend W. Awdry railway books with Thomas the Tank Engine and all that also, and I had to do all the different voices for them, and it was okay for the first 10 books because you basically had Thomas, Edward, Henry, Gordon, and James, and that was about it. So 5 different voices I could kind of come up with. But then in the next 10 books, there was like all these other engines came in. I was like, I've got no idea, what engine I'm going to do for this voice. So it got hard work towards the end. But so I wouldn't recommend doing accents because, like you say, they're hard to do them well. You can offend people as well. So it's best to stick with what you are and vary your speed, your pitch, which you can do quite easily. If you lower your voice, or you just talk faster. I mean, just do something high pitched. It's quite a good way of differentiating your characters. You see, it's not changing the accent, but it's changing the pitch, or just use the text to emphasize what you're talking about. Okay, hilarious trying to read the railways. There's all sorts of fun stuff in there. Scarlowy and the other Scottish engines, yes, because actually they're written in a Scottish way, aren't they? Which makes it really hard to read. And pacing, it's very, very easy to rush. Yeah, so you do probably, most of us, need to concentrate on slowing down for an audiobook. Okay, so natural speaking speed would probably have it like this. Okay. They stand on the plains of Corley, looking west of the citadel of Zanjikith. We found the way south blocked, Marikith reported after the army had reached the beleaguered citadel. We couldn't get to prevail that night, so we rode east through the plains of Tron and approached from that way. It seems the Doomguard discounted us. That's way too fast. Okay, you've got to measure it. So, we found the way south blocked, Marikith reported after the army had reached the beleaguered citadel. We couldn't hope to prevail against their might, so we rode to the east through the plains of Tron. Okay, so don't over-egg it again, but find a natural pace. Okay. Bloody hell, I can't even read that fast through. You can't even type that fast either. So that's quite fun. So there's lots of technique stuff here. Okay, lots of technique stuff here. Do you mark different characters' quotes with colour? No, what I do is I make a mistake and then I go back and go, oops, that was the wrong character. That's how I do it, Glenn. Because every so often there's depending on how you've written your novel, there's a whole bunch of dialogue and it doesn't say said character until quite a long way down. So that brings me on to my next thing, okay, which is very, very good, Glenn. So well done. Is basically rehearse. Okay, know your own story. So if you make too many mistakes, you're just going to trash all your time. Okay, so here's an example of all that going wrong. Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corrie. They stand on the plains of Corley, looking west to the citadel of Zanjikith. Yeah, Zanjikith. Looking west to the citadel of Zanjikith. We found the way south blocked, Marikith reported after the army had reached the beleaguered citadel. We could not... Okay, so I won't subject you to any more of that one. You know what I mean? You've got basically the 4 Ps. Or as my dad would say, planning prevents piss poor performance, right? So yes, be familiar with your text. Okay, know what's coming up, know what the words mean, and rehearse it a little bit if you need to. Hopefully you do know what's actually coming up in your story. That was actually the real recording. Sorry. Because the more mistakes you make, the more editing you've got to do. So you're wasting your own time by making mistakes, essentially. Okay. So now here's another thing. Okay. So after this, hopefully you're getting to the point where things are beginning to come toward. Now here is a half decent recording. Okay. Here's a half decent recording where I've tried to take into account all the lessons I've just been teaching myself. So here we go. Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corley, looking west of the citadel of Zanjikith. We found the way south blocked, Marikith reported after the army had reached the beleaguered citadel. We could not hope to prevail against their might, so we rode to the east through the plains of Tron and approached them that way. It seems the Doomguard discounted us. We would have been here sooner, Kumar grunted, but it's a long and weary road. Okay, so there's actually better. Okay, it is a bit rushed, yeah, because I was doing this before the stream and I was running out of time. So yes, it's probably a bit fast, and it's a bit more posh, yeah. Okay, so that's my narration voice, Commander Glenn. That's what you use when you want to be taken seriously. So now that gives you a decent record. Now you probably heard there was a bit of noise at the beginning as I started. That's the audiobook. Yeah, that's basically the shuffle of the pages. It's quite difficult to avoid that. But if you know you've made a noise, stop and give yourself a 2-second gap, because it's going to make it easier to spot it in editing. Okay, and give you some space. Now there is a thing to do about this. Now when you've got your audio file here, you can do things to it. Okay, so if one of the first things you probably would do once you've got rid of all the clicks and pops and bangs is to normalize it. Okay, now what does normalize mean? Well, normalize basically means even out the file such that the loudest thing, okay, in the entire audio file becomes the 100% maximum range. So what it basically does is it tries to increase the volume, but it will only increase the volume up until just before it would clip. Okay, and it does that to the entire audio file in one go. So a normalize basically brings it to that maximum point, and then matches everything else in the stream to it. So that's a useful thing to be able to do. Now, here's another little thing. Audible, for reasons I don't quite understand, requires you to normalize your files, but then actually bring them down from the peak value by a certain number of decibels. I don't know why that is, but that's something that quite often I get picked up. When I submit a file to Audible, it comes up, you need to normalize down. I think it's to give them some headroom so they can apply some post-processing of their own to the file. So that's just something to be aware of when you submit to Audible. They don't like 100% normalized files for reasons. I think they do something to the files afterwards, and they need a bit of headroom in the audio file. So that's just a thing to be be aware of. The other thing that's quite important is to have the option to do a bit of noise reduction. Now these, I've set my microphones up here so they're not too noisy. I've got the levels pretty much okay. So if I don't say anything for a moment, okay, the sound you're hearing when I'm not saying anything is the ambient noise of the room. Okay. Now that will usually come out as a sort of very faint hiss in the background of your audio recording. Now, ideally, you don't want much of that. Okay. If it's barely audible, then it kind of doesn't matter, because if you can't hear it, you can't hear it. Okay. You don't want to zap everything down to zero, at least in my experience, because that almost sounds artificially low. It kind of almost, because it's so quiet, it sounds a bit weird when you do start talking. Now you can use a noise gate. That's a good suggestion, Cedar. So a noise gate is like it's a filter that you apply to the sound, which basically says if it's below this threshold, then lower it even further. So it doesn't affect anything that you're speaking about, because that's obviously quite noisy. But any sound below a certain threshold, it will kind of eliminate automatically. And you can set how far down it will go and how aggressive you want it to be. They're quite good at removing ambient sounds. You don't want to make them too aggressive, because otherwise it drops so far that you kind of think, oh, there's almost like a weird vacuum in my ears in between the speech, and some people could be quite sensitive to that. So again, something to experiment with. I tend to use a bit of noise cancellation in mine, just to tweak it down. And the way I do it is I do it like this. So I record some ambient background noise from the mic in the following way.
This is the start of noise reduction. And this is the end of noise reduction.
Okay, so at the beginning and end of my audio recording, I do a test. So from here, there will be some ambient blank space in the recording. And in Mixcraft, what I can do is I can say, Mixcraft, here is where noise exists. Here's some good quality noise for you to have a listen to, right? That gives me the option of adding in some noise reduction. Now I can be, really brutal with it and go 100% noise reduction. Well, that sounds like a good thing, but it isn't. Okay, so you never want to make your noise reduction really aggressive. All of these filters you want to use at relatively low levels. If you can hear in your recording, if you can hear hiss and ambient noises in your recording, you've probably got the gain up too high somewhere in the whole recording process. Or there's something wrong with your equipment, or there's something wrong with the room in which you're doing it. Ideally, you should barely be able to hear any noise anyway before you start. The less noise you actually record, the better. But you will probably want to have the option to put in a bit of noise reduction. Now, I generally will not go higher than about 25%. Now, what that does is it tries to identify, based on what's going on in this gap in the audio file, it processes the rest of the audio file and removes that noise. Okay, so it should pull out any of the hiss that's still there. Lucky Luigi says, as you get older, your hearing degrades. How does this affect the ability to record? Well, it's going to have an impact. So you might want to run it by a teenager if there's a handy teenager lurking about. Just say, what do you think? How does the audio quality sound? People have different ears, and that's the other thing. Listening to audiobooks in terms of actually listening to them. Now, as you saw with my my setup here, I do have a pair of small speakers, and there is actually a subwoofer on there. And that's fine for playing games, but it's not good for audio. Okay, for audio, I absolutely recommend a decent set of headphones. Okay, now these ones are noise cancelling headphones, so they take out the ambient noise of the room themselves using their clever technology. You can switch that on and off if you're trying to double check everything, so you can hopefully only hear what's actually recording, coming through the recording, and you'll do a far better job of editing with headphones than you will with a pair of speakers for audiobooks. That's my opinion on it. I find you can hear a lot more dynamics. And if it sounds good in headphones, it'll sound good in speakers. But if it sounds good in headphones, it sounds good in speakers. It doesn't necessarily sound good in headphones. And most people are wandering around with earphones of some kind in their ears. So you kind of do want to optimize the experience for that. I'll have to wait for another 6 years. My teenagers are still growing. So that's the thing. Now, let me show you what happens if you overdo this. Okay, so I'm going to play this from here. This is with the noise reduction at 25%, and you shouldn't notice much.
Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west to the citadel of Zagakith.
Okay, so 25% noise reduction just removes any extraneous hiss that might have been there, but doesn't do any damage to the audio file. Okay, now compare and contrast. If I switch that to 100% noise reduction, it's going to be really, really aggressive, and you should be able to hear some artifacts caused by the noise reduction system itself.
Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west to the citadel of Zagakith.
Now it's subtle, but there's a slight kind of, almost as if the MP3 file hasn't formatted quite right. It's quite hard to describe. It's almost like it's a sort of weird mulchiness that comes across into the audio in those environments. Now, some people are really sensitive to it, and some people aren't. It might be hard to. I don't know what Twitch does to the audio at your end. I can certainly hear it, but you might not be able to hear it at your end, depending on the quality. It could be Twitch is doing something to it, but it's you basically don't want to be too aggressive with these filters, okay? Because they will chew up your audio a little bit. So use the filters to tidy things up. Don't rely on them, and try and remove all the noise from your recording before you start recording. That's going to be much helpful. I didn't hear anything about. I'm not there. Yeah. Do I ever use audio compression? I generally don't, because I'm not doing anything all that sophisticated here, Commander C Dweller. So I generally don't do audio compression. You can get into a lot of stuff if you want to really get into it. There are. You can start messing about with EQ. So let me talk very briefly about it. This brings us back to graphic equalizers. Okay, so it's all good fun. If I start applying FX here, what I can do is I can add in, and there's stack loads of stuff. Okay, you can add in a compressor, and the compressor will allow you to do things, even out aspects of the recording, because by default. Our voice, the recording that we get, doesn't have all the frequencies being represented equally, and compression and a bit of EQ can level these things out and make the recording sound a lot more natural. Now that is a real art form. Okay, now I'm by no means an expert on that at all. I generally don't tend to faff about with it yet, because I've never had any complaints about this level of the recording side of things, but it's probably an area that I could improve if I wish to. So there's all sorts of stuff you can do in here as well. If we look at the EQ one, which I'm a bit more familiar with, so for example, let's take some extreme stuff. Okay, let's go with and you can use some of this stuff. So I wouldn't play around with this too much. What I tend to use these for is special effects. Okay, so for example, AM radio. Here's the EQ for that. Okay, so what it's basically doing is it's cutting out a lot of the treble. It's cutting massive amounts out of the bass, and it's sort of boosting, in general terms, the mid-range. Now that effect has this on the audio file.
Chapter 17. Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west to the citadel of Zajikith.
I'm not sure that one actually worked. Let me just try another one.
Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west to the citadel of Zajikith. Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west to the citadel of Zajikith.
Okay, so those sort of things can be subtle. So, for Maru's radio transmission, for example, I did use exactly those sort of things. Okay, so you can take a little bit, modify it, and then maybe put some background hiss over it or whatever you happen to do. You can also apply loads of effects, delays, distortion, reverb. Here you can go for crazy reverb. So here's a canyon. Let's go for dripping wet FX. I don't know what that is.
Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west to the citadel of Zajikith.
Okay, so that's clearly way too much. But for a special effect, if you want a dream sequence, or you're trying to get across some thoughts, or you're trying to get things like that in, okay, you can use those effects to emphasize things. Okay, what was the other one there? In the sewer. I don't know what that one sounds like. Who is that? I don't know what that was. Was that something else? With their heads down the toilet. Yeah. So you can use a large room. I don't know what that one sounds like.
Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west to the citadel of Zajikith.
Okay, so that one's a bit more subtle. It's that's kind of a nice reverb, and depending on the audio tool you're using, you'll have all sorts of different stuff to do. Now the trick is, don't overdo it again, but there's lots of things that you can use here to add a little bit of finesse and pizzazz to your audio recording. But I don't use it too much, and I have a few settings. So, for example, in my Shadewood books, I had reverb and a kind of chorus echo for the priestess's mental thoughts. And I also slowed down my speech digitally for Caesar and added a bit of reverb. So, for example, Caesar, I did like this. So I would have taken that piece of audio and I would have time stretched it, or adjust the pitch rather, down probably by a couple of semitones. I can't remember now. So something like that, probably. And it would sound like this.
Chapter 17. They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west to the citadel of Zajikith.
And so I've used that sort of technique to emphasize a character. Okay, so you can pitch change your recording and you can speed it up and do various different bits and pieces. Again, don't do it too much, but otherwise it kind of becomes caricaturized. But if you do it a little bit, that can help by making your voice sound a bit more monotonic or deeper than you can naturally do comfortably, and that gives you a little bit to play around with different characters. You can play with left and right channels. You can, if you want to, position it. So, for example, because I've got multiple tracks here, what I could do, if I wished, so go back to the mixer. I can't play. I mean, this all sound like this is basically will be a chorus of Drews here. If I play this now, it would sound dreadful.
That way, the army had used a doom guard distinctly but it's a long and weary road.
Which actually makes some quite good conversational background noise. A decent audio mixer like this will allow you to do multiple things. Okay, so that was the multi-drew. But what you can do with the mixer here, okay, is you can adjust the level of each of the channels if you wish. All right, you can add effects or not to each channel. You can also add the EQ, so you can add more high, low, medium here manually. But you can also decide how far left and right you want. So if I take two of the channels, let's take the two half decent ones, okay, but they'll be out of sequence. So I'm going to mute the others for a moment. There we go. So I've got two channels live here, this channel here and this channel here, so channel 6 and channel 7. And if I put one extremely left and one extremely right, you will have a stereo effect. Okay, you'll have a stereo effect, which will probably sound very, very weird. So here we go. Let's try this.
This is the noise reduction.
They stand on the plains of Corelay, looking west of the citadel of Zajikith.
This is the end of noise reduction.
We found the way south blocked, Marikith reported after the army had
Chapter
reached
17.
the citadel.
They stand on the plains of
against their
Corelay,
might.
looking west.
So we rode to the... So again, depending on the effect you're after, there's lots of stuff to play with. Okay, now I haven't used left or right separation on any of my audiobooks yet, but if you want to enhance what you're doing, then you can. Okay, so if you want to position your characters in an audio scene and direct it like that, there is the capability to do that. Now, if you're just the narrator, you probably don't need it. But if you want to go a step further and you do record different people for different voices and you actually dramatize it, that stuff becomes really, really important. Okay, so there's plenty of stuff. There's plenty of stuff to do. Okay, but the basics are basically what I've covered this evening. The technique, the equipment, the environment, the technology, everything else you need to kind of get started. That's duplicating very good. That's kind of the basics. Okay. Of audiobook stuff, and ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to mix that down to when you've got all your files in order and you've done all the editing, and just a word on editing, the way you basically do it, what basically I do is I go, right, I can see there's a click there. I'm going to split the sound at that point. I'm going to split the sound at that point, and I'll simply delete that central section. There we go, delete, and it's gone. That click is no longer there. And if I feel the gap is too long, I can shuffle the performance up. I can even overlap it if necessary, depending on what I'm trying to do. So this is called a non-linear editor. And a good editor is going to allow you to shuffle things around like that and move things around and do all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so it's and see, that was right. Don't leave a blank space like that. Get yourself a blank noise sample, otherwise you're going to have complete zone of deadness in the recording, which will sound really, really weird. You probably don't want that. Little techniques like that will help to make sure it sounds normal. You don't want zero volume level. That does sound a bit odd to our ears. We kind of expect a very, very faint amount of background noise, so don't be too harsh on deleting the nothingness, because you need a bit of nothingness in there. That makes sense. So those are things, and ultimately you'll be saving it. You're mixing it down ultimately to a file format. Now, what I tend to do is I tend to mix it down to a master copy in waveform. So I've got the high quality version, and then I basically sample it down to MP3 from there. So I'm always working with a decent quality recording, rather than never edit and muck about with things in a lower format than you can possibly do. Leave that right to the last minute. So the way I organise it, so let me show you how it's organised in here. This is the way I do it. So under books, audiobooks. Of course, I've moved it across to a different PC. So hang on a minute. Let me just go and get it. It'll be under here. Audio recording. So take the last one I completed, Shadewood Expiation. So what I tend to do here is I've got the raw recording. Okay, and these are the final versions, which have been mixed down to MP3. But there's the I break it down into various points and put them all into files. Then what I tend to do is I add in the special effects. If we have a look at, I'm going to just save that one away for the moment. If we have a quick look at what that looks like here, this is for Shadewood 4. Hopefully this file format still works okay. We'll find out. It may have lost the original recordings, we'll see. It's having a think. Oh no, there it is. Okay, so this is the intro for this is the intro for Shadewood 4. So again, just listen to this because it. Fantastic Books Publishing presents Shadewood Expiation, Part 4 of the Shadewood Saga by Drew Wager. Read by Drew Wager. Got to switch my mic back on. Sorry. So what you're noticing here, there's a music channel and there's a voice channel. Okay, two separate channels. Okay. As a result of that, the music is playing in its recording at a constant volume. Okay. Now, what you tend to do is when you're going to have voice over music, you have to reduce the level of the music to match. So what you notice here is it's tracking along. It gets to this point here, and the volume level of the music takes a dive just as the audio is starting, the voice is starting. As the voice finishes, the audio level of the music rises back up to its crescendo and then drops away to a fade. So you can do that again inside the editor. So it's a nice, easy graphical way to do it. So listen to it again, you'll see. Watch where the cursor is relative to the dots on the volume, and you'll see what it's doing. Fantastic Books Publishing presents Shadewood Expiation, Part 4 of the Shadewood Saga by Drew Wager. Read by Drew Wager. So there you go. So that's basically how I do the thing. Have I ever tried using sidechain processing to do this automatically? No. I haven't. I need to look into that. I like fiddling with it manually, to be honest. It gives me a lot of comfort. That's exactly how I want it to do. But things are getting more sophisticated now. There are lots of other ways to do this. But this is the way I've done it in the past, just to allow myself to tweak things exactly how I want it to be. And the nice thing about these little dots here, as you can probably expect, is you literally drag them around and go, right, it feels like about there is where it should be. And then you can obviously just play it back and go, does that sound how I want it to sound? So that's how I've always done it. Now that's my current process. So I tend to add in the music where necessary. Manual's best if you're not doing it a lot. Yeah, so I mean I'm only editing 1 or 2 audiobooks a year. I'm not doing this every day, so it's not too big a deal. But again, it depends on how much you're chucking out and how often. If I can get the server to come back. Unfortunately, this is my PC downstairs that it's now accessing because I haven't got a copy locally at the moment. We probably need to I think you might need to explain sidechain processing. I've read about it. I haven't used it at all. So feel free again to dump in the chat Commander C dweller about sidechain processing, because you could probably explain it better than me. That would be quite cool. Sounds like the X-Files theme says Winter Beauty. Yes, it kind of got that vibe to it. That's kind of what I was after with that one. Now, music you can of course compose yourself if you've got the option to do so. You can license it from other places. If you are using somebody else's music, please make sure you license it, because A, it's not very good ethics if you don't, and B, you can get yourself into trouble if Audible detects licensable music in your upload and you haven't identified it correctly or paid for it, etc. Why is this taking so long? What's it doing? Let's try and get that. I don't know what it's doing there. Let's try and get back. I think it's fallen asleep. Not sure what's happened to my server. Anyway, so the long and the short of that is, looks like it's died a death. Maybe my PC's died a death downstairs. Doesn't seem to want to talk to us. It's not accessible. Oh dear. So I break it down into music and special effects and various other bits and pieces, so I know which bit I'm working on. I can always go back to a previous version if I wish. So I do my kind of version control, if you like, manually, and make sure it's all there. So sidechain processing, says Command C is using the audio signal from one track to affect another audio track's characteristics such as volume. So it picks up the fact that there's some voice coming on and automatically alters the volume of another. So I haven't tried that, but that sounds like quite a neat thing to look in, particularly if you're cramming out a lot. So I imagine more professional studios and things are going to be doing that sort of stuff. Now I've found Mixcraft here is the tool. Now this is a paid for product, but you'll find Audacity can do all this kind of stuff as well. It depends what you're used to. I've just got more used to using Mixcraft over the years, so that's what I tend to kind of gravitate to, and it's never let me down. It does everything that I need it to do, which is kind of important. So your choice of tool is entirely up to you. What you want to use, what you don't want to use. It depends on the software that you've got and how far you want to go with it and how sophisticated you need it to be. You may find some of these tools a bit overwhelming to start with. They are pretty complicated. They can do a lot of stuff. So it's best to stick to them bit by bit and use them ultimately. What you're ultimately ending up for now, in terms of the audiobook, to go, let's say you want to send it to Audible as a final step. That you'll basically, what they want is they want an intro, as you just heard. They will want an outro as well. So your intro is usually you're listening to da 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 by da da da. A so-and-so novel published by any copyright stuff that needs to go in there. Okay, and then prologue or chapter 1, whatever the first thing is. So you need an intro. You'll also need an outro, which sort of says similar sort of things, and generally plays out a bit longer, which is where you have a longer piece of music in there. You'll need a file for every single chapter. Okay, so Audible requires you to record things in chapters and upload things in chapters. Okay. Now, whether you have any incidental music is entirely up to you. I try to use it a little bit sparingly at the beginning of a chapter, just to say, here's a chapter, guys. And sometimes if there's a dramatic moment in the story, then a dramatic sting of some kind, okay, will happen. Again, use it sparingly, use it as much as you think is appropriate. But ultimately, mix it down to some files, and then you're uploading those. That will then go into Audible's quality control system, and a few days or weeks later, you'll get an email back with either, hey, everything's okay, yay, we've submitted it for publishing, it'll be on the website in a few hours, or you've got some problems in these files, you need to go and fix the audio and resubmit. And it's up to you to work out what's wrong and try and fix it and then resubmit it. Wrong things could be the normalization is wrong, the quality isn't high enough for whatever reason, you've sent the wrong file twice, i.e. you've done a renaming problem and you've accidentally sent something incorrectly. It could be that there's too much noise, so they do have a quality pass that they have to because they don't want any old dross audio on their website, obviously. So if it doesn't pass their audio checks, they will reject it, and you'll have to go back and figure out what went wrong and do it again. So so all that sort of stuff is stuff that you need to bear in mind when you're producing it. Easy to get carried away. I've got to admit, seemingly you got a bit carried away with the dramatic music in Shadewood for my taste. Okay, so there's some live feedback. You can overdo it, yeah, and it is a personal thing. Is the quality pass a human listening or just bots? I think it's probably just bots, Glenn. I think it's probably just some kind of automated check that's looking for levels, looking for sound quality, looking for any weird artifacts and stuff, or compression artifacts and things like that, or repetitions in files, that kind of thing. It doesn't seem like a particularly high quality bar to pass, but it's something to bear in mind that you will have to pass a quality check. And then basically once it's gone through that, it associates itself with your ebook on the website, so you can search for it through Amazon.com or Audible.com, and your audiobook is done. How long does it take? Okay, so in the closing moments of the stream, how long does it take? Well, it took me about 18 months to write this and edit it, okay? And that's 150,000 words. How long did it take me to read it? Well, I haven't finished this one yet. But an average audiobook is, like I said, is about 20 to 24 hours long. Okay, at least one of mine is. Some of the shorter ones will be less than that. But each chapter is easily an hour, okay, in my world, and I've got about 20 chapters per book. So 120,000 words is about 15 to 20 hours of voice, okay, and that's edited voice. So including all the mistakes, you're probably going to be spending a good 30 to 35 hours in front of a microphone in order to record an audiobook. So that's the first piece. The second piece is you're going to have to go and edit that. That's going to take about the same length of time easily again. And then you're going to add any music stroke special effects in. That's a chunk of time as well. Now, when you're recording, I don't recommend that you do more than an hour a day, all right? Because your voice, you can damage your voice, you can wear it out, you can, particularly if you're not used to doing a lot of talking, you can bust your voice. So do be careful. That is a thing that does happen. So I'd recommend no more than hours recording a day until you've built up your vocal cords. Your vocal cords are just another muscle, okay? I've definitely busted that PC. Your vocal cords are just another muscle, so you need to build up to doing a lot of speaking. You can't just go, right, I'm going to record an audiobook today, unless you already do a lot of talking and your voice is used to it, because it's quite a strain on your voice to talk specifically and concentrate. So keep yourself lubricated with a warm glass of water, as I mentioned, and do about an hour a day. So that means that you've got probably easily a month or two just recording, because if you're going to do an hour a day, which is what I recommend, then you can spread it out over several weeks. It's inevitable. Editing you can do kind of whenever you want, but editing is very, 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 very boring. Listening to yourself over and over again, going, "Is that a click? Do I need to edit that?" And there's no such thing as a spell check or an automatic, editing thing for audio. You've got to listen to the whole thing again. Okay, so you're probably talking 3 or 4 months by the time you got through that. Then the special effects, then all the fixes and all the tweaks and everything else that you want to add in. So it's a good fun. I would say you're doing well if you. If you're try to keep yourself well lubricated and your knobs well damped. Exactly. So you're probably talking a good 3, 4, 5 months to do an audiobook after you've started with a finished book. Okay, so that's going fairly well. Okay, they can't see typos, but they can hear errors, Commander Glenn. So that's an important thing as well. So that really gives you hopefully an introduction to audiobooks. It's a great thing. It's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun to do, but don't be under, again, as anything else in this whole writing thing, right? Don't be under the illusion that it's anything but hard work, all right? Because it's a lot of work. So, you've got to sink another, after, let's say you've written a book in a year, and that's 6 months of writing and 6 months of editing and prepping and polishing, etc. Now you're basically saying, here's another 6 months to produce the audio version of it. I would guess that's probably a good rule of thumb. So if you're going to go from soup to nuts with a book, ebook, paperback, and audiobook, you're probably talking 18 months to do a decent job of it, I would guess. So that's all doing it yourself. Now you can. One thing I didn't mention, which we ought to cover briefly before we finish, is okay. You can get other people to do this. Yes, you can. Do you have to, well, first of all, do you have to buy all this equipment? No, you don't. You can go and hire some time in the studio and they'll record it for you, okay? All you then need to do is read it, okay? Now, if you're going to do that, you probably want to make the best use of your studio time. So you're going to have to be prepared to do a day's recording. Now that is not an easy thing to do, okay? Just, physically. Okay, but you can do it. But even if you can talk non-stop for 7 hours, and I really wouldn't recommend you did that, and you can do that consistently, you're still talking probably a week of recording to get it all done, right? And it's not cheap. Okay, to hire a decent audio studio will cost you a fair chunk, which you could probably buy a PC and a microphone for, to be honest. So you could, that is an option. But it's not a very scalable option. It's quite an expensive option. Now, on top of that, you could ask other people to do it for you. There's plenty of people who will do audiobook work. Now, in terms of the cost, I've never really investigated it, but I would be very surprised if it was super cheap. Okay, I'm pretty much certain it isn't. Okay, so on top of engineers and studio time and paid actors, you're talking a lot of money. Okay, and that's probably not an option for most of it. It certainly wouldn't be an option for me. The only reason we were able to do Elite Reclamation to the quality that we did, which is semi-dramatized, it's not full dramatization, but semi-dramatized, is that we were able to hook in, oh gosh, what's his name? The voice actor, whose name escapes me suddenly. It's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, did I get a quote for reading 9 strips? Yes, I think I did. Yeah, it was about $4,000, wasn't it? It's like, okay, next. So yes, that's probably true. So I think I did. And again, we could do those sort of things. Toby Longworth. There we go. So Toby Longworth was Dan Grubb at Fantastic Publishing. A, knew him. B, was able to get him to do things in a compressed time space, and we had effectively a free studio for reasons that won't become clear straight away. And we had we'd able to raise the money through the Kickstarter, so we had some cash, we had some contacts, and we had a cheap studio. So that was the only reason we were able to do it. I've done all my audiobooks simply because of cost, and I like doing it myself anyway, and I quite enjoy the process of reading and doing audiobook stuff. I like doing the editing and I like doing the recording. So, and I've got a voice that's hopefully not too bad for an audiobook. But it won't be cheap if you can't do it yourself, I'm afraid. It's just another thing that's really, really expensive. So it is doable, but it's not cheap. And again, if you've traditionally published and you've got an agent, you've gone down that route, they may want to audiobook your book for you, which is great news. Okay, but again, that's an upfront cost that they will have to pay, that you will have to recoup back through sales of your book. So again, if your book doesn't do very well, that might be the end of your publishing career there and then. So at least doing it yourself, you can build up your experience and so on and so forth. I've learned huge amounts about it in the process of doing mine, and I'm getting better at it each time. Hopefully my next one will be far higher quality than I achieved before, because I've just learned a lot about the techniques. So there we go. Interesting aside, I first saw Toby Longworth as part of a comedy duo of Bill Bailey called The Rubber Band. He's an amazing guy. Actually, he's done all sorts of stuff. Does editing the text or recording, editing the audio take longer? I'd say they're fairly comparable, actually, Glenn. It's a big old piece of work. It's certainly months of work. Okay, certainly months of work. Chained to your PC. So it's not an inconsiderable amount of time that needs to be spent on editing. I'm afraid it's a big chunky thing. So there we go. So my friends, we have once more reached the end of the stream. So hopefully that's given you an insight into the art of the audio. And it is an art. It's yet another thing that you have to be proficient in. It's an interesting set of skills, but it's very, very different from traditional writing. Some people won't be able to do it simply because they don't have the ability to read something in front of a microphone and make it sound interesting. I could handle months of listening to my own voice. Well, some writers are okay with it because, like, hey, it's me. I mean, hey, I'm awesome. So listening to myself is no chore at all. But other people don't like the sound of themselves when recording. But it is a bit weird until you get used to it. But I suppose after so many years now, I'm used to hearing myself either on Twitch or YouTube or in my audiobook. So I just put on my narrator's voice and everything's fine. So there we go. Anyway, so thanks for the stream. No problem at all. My pleasure. I'm just hoping to demystify some of this stuff. It's all quite complicated. There's a lot of technicalities in all this stuff. Creating books, creating things, but it's not all that mysterious. You just need to dive in and learn about it. So hopefully this provides you a little bit of insight into what the whole thing looks for. So there we go. Anyway, take care, my friends. Hopefully that's given you some encouragement. I hope it doesn't put the dampers on it too much. It is doable. It is doable, but don't underestimate the amount of work involved. That's all I can say. So take care, my friends. See you soon. Be good. See you on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And we will see you soon. Take care. And as always, right on. Take care now. Bye-bye.